Hello everybody and welcome to Cybertech Tel Aviv 2019. My name is Tzach Horowitz. I'm the pre-sale director for CyberGym, who provides real-life training for IT and OT environments, and I'll be moderating this panel of experts who will talk about cloud security. And the first question I would like you to address are what are the key benefits of transformation to the cloud from security and from compliance requirements?
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me here. I'm looking forward to the discussion. My name is Diana Kelly, and I'm the Cybersecurity Field CTO at Microsoft, where I help customers understand what Microsoft can provide from an end-to-end perspective for security across all of our different portfolio types. So, the security within the cloud and compliance benefits, one of the biggest ones is just the economies of scale. Right? We're going to the cloud for economies of scale around energy use and around being able to leverage hardware that you can spike up usage when you need it. And you can get that economy of scale too with security experts. We have 3,500 security experts around the world, for example, looking at what's going on the net every day. We built our data centers and our Azure data centers with security, from the get-go. So, built on trust, and security has been designed into these centers. So as you go to the cloud as a customer, you can leverage that cloud provider's knowledge and the fact that they have built security into their cloud and that they have experts running the networks. And for compliance, looking at tools, like for example, we have Compliance Manager, being able to report out using tools that are native to the cloud on your cloud usage to understand your compliance posture. So there are really going to be quite a lot of benefits to moving to the cloud.
That's cool. I think that my name is Ariel Zeitlin. I'm CTO for Guardicore. I think one of the surprising benefits that we see for people moving to the cloud is that cloud brings a culture of automation to the company, and it forces the security team to start automating security, which I think reduces a lot of human errors and makes the security actually enablers of moving to the cloud and not somebody who's chasing getting there. And we see a lot of customers transitioning the way they're thinking about security from somebody who is after the fact to somebody who's becoming automated and integrated into the processes. And just by that, they become more secure.
Yeah.
And Benny, could you introduce yourself and also say a little thing about what you do about data and devices on the cloud?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Benny. I'm the CEO and founder of OPSWAT. Our slogan is trust no file, trust no device. So obviously I'm back to your question and your point of view to address data and to address devices. So obviously I see benefits of moving to the cloud. First I see a benefit of moving. The benefit of moving, whenever you move, let's say you move an office or you move a house, it's a great time to clean up from all kinds of weird behavior or things that you accumulated, or let's call it waste. So that's a great time to go and check your inventory. The authentication in the cloud is also an opportunity for security by relying on a single authentication and moving your assets to the cloud. So as long as you are addressing the data security and as long as you're addressing the device security, that's an opportunity to address both. When speaking about device security, then it's all about how do you ensure, as long as you ensure that the endpoints that are touching the cloud are meeting your compliance and the benefit is clear. You don't need to rely on VPNs that were built years ago. Whenever we go to data, it's all about the integration to the cloud and how, as long as you address the data flow to the cloud and from the cloud, you should be all set.
And how would the move to the cloud help us automate securing the data, the networks, and all the employing all the policies?
As I mentioned, I think that when you move to the cloud, the way developers and application owners are consuming the cloud is everything about APIs and automation. And the security team has to catch up. If they're not automating anything, if they're keep on doing what they were doing on-prem, the application owners will be just in the cloud without security. So I think the fact that everything has to work with APIs, everything has to work in an automated way. This is what helps to be more secure in the cloud.
And these are the benefits, but what about the risks? What a CIO or a CISO should consider when moving to the cloud, in addition to just maintaining an inventory of the data and moving it?
That's a great question. So number one is that if we're going to go back to the data and you want to move, let's say, your web server to the cloud. Let's say if you have a web server, if you want to now move it from your hosted environment, you want to go and move it to the cloud, what do? I mean, you need to go and protect it. You need to obviously move the infrastructure. Whenever you look at the data flow, what can you rely on to make sure that the data that is going to go and flow to your servers is going to be clean of malware? So nothing, you can't really rely on anything. Antivirus is not enough, you know that, and one big tip for everybody is definitely check the efficacy of antiviruses on dynamic analysis and static analysis. Many of the reports of antiviruses refer to dynamic analysis where you achieve close to 90-something%. Or when you go to static, the efficacy is much lower, way lower, talking about 75%, 5 to 75%. So you can't rely on antivirus. Sandboxes are not really, first, easy to bypass. Not easy, I mean, easier to bypass if you know what you're doing. Second, extremely CPU intensive. So what are going to be meaningful way for you to really move to the cloud whenever you're looking at data, when you can't trust an antivirus and you can't trust the sandbox? What can you do?
Yeah.
So this is one question that I would say I would recommend admins to go and check and to go and ask themselves what can they do about it. With regards to security risks of devices going to the cloud, number one is BYOD. We see an increase in BYOD and also an increase of moving to the cloud. So how do you really ensure that BYOD, that logging onto your cloud application, is available to everybody? How secure? And how secure to trust? How can you really trust the device to a point that you can really ensure end-to-end whenever you have a growth in different operating systems? So if 7 years ago, 10 years ago, you just had 1 or 2 operating systems. Now we have many. Now you have various devices, and you need to make sure that each one of them is secure. And how do you address the BYOD? How do you distinguish between your BYOD and your managed devices?
Yeah.
So I think completely agree with everything Benny said, and I would add on to that. Also looking at the cloud, the security, one of the big security issues for CISOs is not understanding the differences in the cloud and hoping that they can just repeat what they have on-prem, because it's a different mindset managing a cloud infrastructure and your cloud operations than it is managing on-prem. So if you're used to the old world of you use your IDS to see all your network traffic and everything is managed in-house, then you can't just lift everything the way it is right into the cloud. You've got to have a strategy. The cloud can in many cases be more secure than what was being used on-prem, but not if you don't plan for it and create a transition strategy.
Yeah, and I would emphasize the look on security and the strategy, and especially 3 aspects. One of them, authentication and authorization, be it zero trust or other strategies to defend the assets on the cloud. Secondly is the business continuity and resiliency capabilities, which in the cloud are different. There have been cases where specific information was lost even on backed up cloud assets. So you should, as a CIO or a CISO, take into consideration what you do if bad comes to worst. Yeah. And the third thing that I would highlight is that in many organizations, people are understanding that employees are using BYOA, using their own applications in order to handle company information, be it file storage information, be it personal email services and so on. And I would at least devise a strategy, if not enforce it. The next question I would have for you is how to handle compliance and regulation, especially when working with multiple cloud providers.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Yeah, so that's another challenge. That's another big challenge. I would say first, if you're looking at, let's look at the recent GDPR saga, right? So how do you really ensure that your employees' data or your customers' data, as you are storing them in the cloud, you're not storing personal identifying information? How do you do and set up, and how do you address the content flowing to the cloud and making sure there is nothing there? How do you implement DLP into the data flow in an effective, efficient way? And then with regards to the device security, how do you also meet HIPAA and other regulations as, let's say that you are a hospital and you have HIPAA regulation and you need to make sure that your device is logging on to your new cloud storage, that whoever cloud storage is encrypted, and to a point that personal data is not going to be leaked in the case of a lost device or a stolen device. So that's, so whenever you're looking traditionally on VPNs and the old ways the IT used to be 10 years ago, things were already set. You had already the systems for that. Let's go back to the planning on addressing, moving to the cloud and addressing and ensuring that the same tools or different tools, we need to ensure it.
Yeah, even if we encrypt the information on the cloud, what happens when it's in motion or when it arrives to its destination?
Yeah, it's absolutely. There's, I think, going to a previous question, a lot of organizations move to the multi-cloud world either by decision of business risk or by the fact that this just happened to them. They acquired a company that was using a different cloud provider, or the developers were just doing whatever they want before their security came in, gained control. So they are facing this multi-cloud reality. Well, in fact, they're facing even more because they still have their on-prem environment with bare metal servers, containers that are running on-prem, virtual environments, and it all becomes one very complex environment to manage. Each one has its different APIs. There is no API consolidation and will never be, I guess, because they want to compete. And so now the security team needs to manage APIs for everything for AWS, different set of APIs for Azure, different set of APIs for their on-prem servers. So it becomes complex, not just from gaining control of your infrastructure, but how do you deploy security in every single one of those environments? And unless, so this is a big challenge. The complexity of the cloud and the lack of visibility just multiplies as the further you go into the cloud journey if you deploy in multi-cloud. So this is a significant challenge. I think the only way for a security team to get control of this and not being lost in this complexity and this variety of different cloud providers is to deploy technology and processes that would be agnostic to the infrastructure. So if they can automate things that the policy or what they want to achieve is somehow automated and deployed specifically for each cloud provider, this is the only way for them to stay on top.
And I think it's important to look for cloud partners that give you some tools for visibility into the cloud. So you talked about APIs, or we have a graph API and a security graph API so that you can get in and see what's going on in your part of Azure. We also have some tools created like Compliance Manager and Azure Security Center, so you can see how many VMs you have running, what their patch state is, because if your provider's giving you native tools so that you can get better visibility, then that's a win. If you don't have visibility into your part of the cloud, that can really impact your overall security stance clearly. And there's also, it's important to understand the shared responsibility model too in the cloud, because if you're using IaaS versus PaaS versus SaaS, the level of responsibility changes and shifts a little bit. So you might hear compliance, you may hear your cloud vendor say, well, we're PCI compliant. Well, that's great. That means that their network is PCI compliant, but you could still build an application that's not, say, PADS DSS compliant, or you may not lock it down properly, and that's at the higher level of the stack. So it's important to also know that you look for the tools from your provider, but also look for guidance around that shared responsibility model and what you as the customer are responsible for versus what the provider's responsible for.
So what should we ask the cloud providers when we go to evaluate a solution?
Oh, so that's, I would say, various things. So I'd like to address the data first. What kind of questions to go and ask? How do they deal with the data? So I would say question number one is how data is flowing. How do you guys protect the data flow to the cloud and from the cloud? So what we do at OPSWAT, we regenerate the file. We have a technology called data sanitization, also called CDR, where we don't trust the file and we rebuild it as it flows to the cloud to ensure that nothing kind of the data on the cloud is not going to be malicious. Other things that I would ask, what do you do about related to confidential data flowing to the cloud and leaving the cloud? So how do you really ensure data loss and data loss prevention when you want to go and look for personal information that you're storing, whether it's your customers or these are your employees, and how can you go and address it? If you use the cloud to store any binaries or anything like that, how would you ensure that it's not vulnerable? So how do you ensure that the data that you are bringing to the cloud does not include any vulnerability, and some of the vulnerabilities could be addressed? Whenever we go to the devices, I would ask the cloud provider, how do you address the device compliance touching your cloud services? And then here would be, I would say, also it will be your employees first. How do you address your employees? How you in the employees you have the managed devices, and how you truly address the managed device security as they are accessing your cloud application. How do you ensure compliance there, and how do you ensure that the devices that are touching your cloud application does not have anything malicious? The USB and peripheral media information there is being controlled and managed. There are no critical vulnerabilities on the devices. The devices are compliant and are running an antivirus that you trust. For that, we developed a product called Meta Access, and with Meta Access, our customers are ensuring, and as they are deploying cloud application, they're ensuring that their employees, whether it's a BYOD device or their managed devices, can ensure end-to-end access and ensure that only trusted devices can touch their cloud applications. The same thing could be also for the users. Also, we see more and more customers and users moving the cloud infrastructure and addressing users, such as it could be e-commerce or any banking applications moving to the cloud, and ensuring the users that are touching and connecting to the bank does not have any malware on the device, stealing their password. And that could be even for CRM applications such as Salesforce and others, where there are a very common malware that the whole intent is to steal the password and to do industrial espionage on this specific company. So I would say a question to ask is, and things to ensure, is that the data flow that is flowing to the cloud is rebuilt, regenerated to a point that you are reducing the attack surface significantly, and you're not relying on an antivirus or a sandbox or other cloud provider. So that would be tip one. And second, as you are looking at access to the cloud to the devices, look at your employees or look at your users as well.
Yeah, and we have a question from the audience, which Ariel, maybe you're most qualified to answer, which is, why is it so difficult to deploy a network IDS or IPS in a cloud environment? And I would enlarge it, why is it so difficult to secure cloud environments from within and without?
I think that one of the key differences when you move to the cloud is you don't have the access to the network that you used to have. So there is no easy way to deploy network devices that you used to have on your network, because this is the one thing that the cloud provider doesn't let you to control, or give you a lot of limitations how to control that. And another thing is that a lot of applications, when they move to the cloud, they leverage the speed and the agility of the cloud and have growing cloud presence during a specific peaks of trading or and so on. So your environment can change and be very dynamic and grow and shrink back. So this is where those traditional network devices that we use to control very kind of static network choke points are now just not applicable anymore. And this is why there is a wave of new network security vendors that are more cloud native or built into the cloud that actually bring the network security knowledge from a centralized choke points to the edge itself, and thus ensure that it grows with the cloud and changes and is dynamic and it follows the application. But the whole idea of a network device that is controlling some static choke points is not very applicable to the cloud unless the application there is also very static and doesn't change a lot. But then you're not using the cloud the right way.
And I think it's really important for CIOs and CISOs to consider the fact that as they move, just because they may not be able to bring their IPS, their on-premise IPS or their on-premise IDS with them, doesn't mean they need to lose the business use case of security and controls that they were getting from those devices. So you can still put sensors in your containers, you can put sensors in your VMs, you can send log files to a central repository for to look at. So it's just that you don't have the exact same thing in the cloud. It doesn't mean that because the tool isn't there, that the business use case for visibility also has to be lost. And a lot of the cloud providers, for IPS, a lot of that was really to help to defend against malicious traffic coming in towards your systems. Well, a lot of the cloud providers have, they have DDoS protection, they have IPS-like capabilities to block malicious activity coming in. So you may still be getting that business need met in the controls, just not with the same tools that you were using on-prem.
One of the challenges with EFC, and that personally I think that IDS is a bit outdated technology, but the problem is that if you look at some of the regulations, if you look at PCI compliance, it requires an IDS. Yeah. So I do agree that there is a need to change the approach to identify breaches, which is IDS was built for, but still the regulation is still not there with the compensating controls that you can deploy to check this regulation. So we still see people trying to pull their old school IDS with signatures to protect, because this is what the regulator requires.
What do you do in multi-cloud environments with IPS, and whenever you're looking at IPS on a multi-cloud environment? How do you track the flow between two different clouds?
I think what people do is I don't recommend using IPS, but if they still stick to that, then you will need to put an IPS at every interconnect, at every choke point, I would say.
I see.
There's the only way to control the traffic.
Do you guys do event correlation between the different clouds whenever it happens?
Oh, we don't do IPS, but that becomes a challenge. Not just different clouds. You can think of each VPC inside each of the cloud as a different network that the data can flow, and the VPC can have different security risks between them. So you can have a VPC that is PCI regulated and a VPC that is not. And if there is information going on, and then
I just simply see an opportunity just because of the event correlation on different clouds. So when you're looking back to segmentation and doing event correlation for that specific use case.
Yeah, so I have a question from the audience. In a hybrid cloud, who has the final responsibility when handling a breach or an incident? And I want to correlate it to some of the roles of your group of understanding the security requirements across different domains, different expertise group, and different experts that are working on the different elements of the architecture.
Right, so the question is that who has the ultimate responsibility in a breach?
In a hybrid environment, which is combined of, could be a private cloud, a public cloud, on-prem deployments, and so on.
Yeah, well, it would depend on the breach, where the breach occurred and what type of breach it is. So it could, again, going back to that shared responsibility model, where in the infrastructure you've got the The hardware and the electricity and availability for that is with the vendor, and then you've got the responsibility as the customer up higher. Now up in SaaS level, there's the patching of the operating system. All of that is now still going to be part of your provider's purview. So where did the breach occur? How did the breach occur? That's actually going to impact who is ultimately responsible. However, it is worth noting that very often when a breach has occurred in the cloud, you'll see headlines that either go right at the cloud provider, even if it was the company that was using the cloud that had not secured the access to their data properly. Because again, it's your data, and you secure access to it. The other thing that you'll see very often, it's important to remember, is that even if it wasn't your company's fault, it may become in the headlines what your company's accountability, because if you're a data steward of your customer's data, you chose that cloud provider, choose that cloud provider very carefully and well, because if they are responsible, but it's your company data, it may be your company's name that's in the headline. In other words, very often what gets in the headline isn't the technical reality who is ultimately
I think
at
the
fault.
responsibility at the end of the day is absolutely the CISOs. If they may go and blame the cloud provider for not being doing their job, but they will be responsible.
Yeah.
And you picked that cloud provider too. That's important to
And
remember.
it's always the CISO.
And again,
It's always CISOs. Yeah, it depends on the security group. I mean, end of the day, if you have a cloud provider, you have some. Just made it easier for IT folks to scale and to host.
So it goes back to strategy, to planning, and to creating the procedures for handling incidents, events, and defining the communication channels so you can access your cloud provider, any other third parties, and of course management if it goes out and you need to report it. I have another question from the audience, which is, what would be the highest concern you would have in moving to a cloud environment?
I think for customers we meet, the highest concern is loss of control, loss of visibility. They move to the cloud, their developers move to the cloud, and sometimes they find themselves, they are already in the cloud, and they don't know exactly how much, and don't know exactly in which cloud provider, and the availability of cloud resources today to any developer that researches his own responsibility and his own team leader's credit card, can buy a few VMs in the cloud, and then he does it. There is no process in many cases that he needs to go through to just enable that, and then here you go. His application is there. The security people are not even in the loop. So I think when we talk to customers who move to the cloud or think they want to move to the cloud, but they already actually moved somehow to the cloud, or they acquire a company that has moved to the cloud, their biggest concern is that how do they bring back the control, or at least the sense of control they had on-prem, and enforce it to what's going on. They sometimes don't even know how many applications and machines they have and with which cloud provider. That basic.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Definitely control and sense of control is the key thing that at least I feel relief whenever we go and deploy Meta Access or we deploy I really feel relief. Oh, they see how many devices are connecting. Oh, they go ahead, because whenever you go and enable authentication back to Meta Access, you see immediately, okay, hey, I have this BYOD connected. Oh, this guy have that many devices, the base status connected to the cloud. So that's one. And however, from the perspective of IT, the biggest risk I see is the data. Because end of the day, you move your data to the cloud, and data is everything you have, right? It's like from the customer's records, could be your confidential data, and the data risk that is the data flow to the cloud, whether it's your own company proprietary data or it's your customer data. This is something I would be very much, I see that as the biggest issue, as the biggest issues. Whenever I see a breach on a customer, after they're coming to us and say, hey, we would like to go and get Meta Defender controlling the data flow, or using our data sanitization to rebuild the data after they've seen that antivirus failed, sandbox failed to go and address the data flow to organizations. So I would say the data, and specifically the control of devices, control of the data moving to the cloud.
Yeah, control and visibility. That's the biggest fear, without a doubt. Completely agree. And I think that the antidote to this fear of losing control and visibility is choosing that cloud provider wisely and asking them, what are you going to let me? What can I see? What can I control in that environment? How are you going to use my data? Is my data going to be monetized for advertising against me? Or is it going to be analyzed to provide better security? So getting that trust from the company and understanding of how they're going to use the data. And I think for control too, will your provider allow you to bring your own keys?
Exactly.
Because that really gives you back as a customer quite a lot of control. You bring the keys, you have the encryption keys, the cloud provider doesn't have them. That means that it's up to you if you share those keys out with anyone.
And related to that, what are the key aspects to look for when you're performing a risk assessment on a cloud provider?
I would say I would go back again to the same elements whenever we're looking at the data. Then what do they use to go and secure the data? It's question number one. Okay, so I'm moving the data to the cloud. How do I know that a part of that could be some services the cloud provider provide, and also other things would be how would you complement that as IT to make sure that you're not storing, you don't have viruses addressing your cloud, flowing to and flying out of download from your cloud, whether it's your customers or users. Two, it would be a confidential data flow to and from the cloud. Some of the cloud providers provide some assets and some tools to help you integrate to the data. So then you want to see how can you go and hook into this data flow from your cloud provider to other security solutions that you have. And obviously the same will apply to the devices, right?
Yeah, and I would ask the provider about what certifications they have, if they've got a separate, if they've looked at FedRAMP and they understand that the cloud, the cloud honors for FedRAMP, the U.S. government, for example, is one case. If they do have certifications like PCI, it doesn't mean that means if your cloud provider is PCI certified, it doesn't mean everything you run in there will be, as I mentioned before. But at least that they've taken some steps to do it, the layers they're responsible for. And then something we were talking about earlier is the CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance, has this great normalized set of questions in the cake, the CAIQ, so that you can help ask questions to your provider that are using, so you can get apples to apples kinds of answers from the provider, because sometimes you read on the website what they offer and the different wording can get very confusing. The other thing that's a great resource for risk management at the CSA is the STAR registry, where the cloud providers answer the normalized set of questions and attest to these are the controls that we're providing you. And again, it's apples to apples, so it's a really good way for companies to get a handle on what their provider is going to be.
Actually, that reminds me, I would also check for compatibility. So, for example, what authentication protocol do you have? So as you're implementing your security tools into the cloud, you want to make sure, okay, hey, which IDP you guys use, or which authentication protocol do you guys support out of the box, so you don't need to go and deploy another authentication in another cloud on your services. Other protocols for integration and interoperability. So for example, ICAP by definition, or specific IDP by definition, and then obviously cost related to data transfer on your security aspect. So if you're expecting to go and analyze security with a different system, either you're going to go and deploy it on the same cloud, and if you can install it in the same cloud, try to measure what's going to be the bandwidth cost that's going to be between clouds
and latency
to enforce, and the latency that is going to be to go and enforce the security measurements on that cloud.
Okay. Another question from the audience regarding browsers usage. Since most of access to the cloud by people, not by APIs, is done by browsers, should we limit the browser types, the versions? Should we control them?
Yes, definitely. Definitely control and definitely. Actually, we did a research on that, and we identified. So we have many users. So we're protecting over 100 million devices today with meta access technology. So we're protecting tons of sessions going to cloud solutions, and also to even some local networks. So we identified like top 10 vulnerabilities. But if you have these vulnerabilities, you're susceptibility to get breached is extremely high. So we recommend to not only restrict a browser, and specifically on a browser, we can even tell you which browser and which plugin for a browser is going to get you susceptible for that. So definitely, yes, we actually recommend to install a really light agent. And this light agent will identify the browser, will identify which plugins you have in the browsers, will also look for specific operating system vulnerabilities as users are logging onto the cloud. I will also go, and I will not also trust a local AV to detect all of that, so do another light virus check for the endpoint as it's happening. I would also check for the peripheral management as for data leakage as users are logging onto the cloud and provide a light check there. On top of that, I would also look at the compliance. So it's not only checking for, whenever we're looking at compliance in the cloud, what I've seen, oh, antivirus is on, let them on. I would go that easy on that. Which antivirus? Is that a certified antivirus? Is that an antivirus that is approved, got high scores? Is that authentic because it's like you have some antivirus has been tempered? And what's the health status of the antivirus? Is that active and all of the services are active? Is it configured correctly? So the browser is, I would say, it's one aspect. So yes, I would actually in browsers, and I would be, that's one quick thing to do, quick thing to check. However, I would go way deeper and check about the plugins of the browser, which patch it has, which version it's on.
Perfect. Diana, could you elaborate a little bit, another question from the audience, about the strategies for ensuring uniform security level or compliance level across the different heterogeneous environments on the cloud, on-prem, and in between?
So the question is the different security levels and compliance levels in a heterogeneous hybrid environment.
Yeah, and how to make sure they all conform to the standard of the organization.
Yeah, so it's really important to step back and understand what each control is and does, because you may not have, as we've mentioned, may not have the same control on a mobile device as you have on a server, or you may not have something on premise that you have in the cloud. So it's stepping back and understanding what controls are needed for that compliance mandate or for that regulation, and then matching it out. And you could use something like the Unified Compliance Framework, which is a really handy tool to be able to do mapping from all the different regulations and compliance activities that are required for your organization to get it back to what's really the control that's in place. So multi-factor authentication, for example, you know, that comes up in a lot of different ways in a lot of different regulations. But if you say, okay, we're going to strip it back to it's got to be multi-factor authentication, and you know what that looks like, then you can match that on each one. Say, what do we have going into the cloud for that? You know, can we use the same MFA across all of our different you know, connections? And sometimes you can in some architectures and some environments. Sometimes you can't, so you may have to say, well, for this one workload, we have a different MFA tool, but we have the same MFA tool across these other set of workloads. So it's really understanding what that real control is, and then ensuring that you've got something that lives up to that for all of the different environments.
Yeah, great, and also I think that unifying your if you can unify the whole authentication, that really simplify a lot. It's really hard for large organizations, so I've seen that happen.
Yeah. And lastly, I would ask you, if I were a new CISO appointed today, what are the first steps I have to do in order to understand what we have on the cloud and how we are going to move forward with it?
So I would ask first which cloud services you want to move to the cloud. Okay, well, first, what's your motivation, right? Understanding your motivation. What are the services and the benefits? And then from that, going back and then building your plan and your strategy around that. What the tools? I would do a cost analysis, and the cost analysis will also include the IT personas that you need to address, because if you're talking about shortage of 2017 surveys, 2018 surveys showing the increased shortage of IT professionals to a point that you have no choice but to use cloud services to address the shortage of your own IT staffing around that. So doing a whole, I would say, ROI calculation on moving that would be the first step.
I would recommend a fearless inventory. So if you're a new CISO going into an organization, doing an inventory of what in the cloud is being used. we don't hear it so much anymore, but shadow IT is real. You get
Yeah.
very motivated
Yes.
employees. They go out and they spin up servers in some cloud provider. They start, developing new apps and workloads. They're trying to do a great job, but they may not be using the tools that are approved
Yes.
by the company. So understanding who's doing what in the cloud and why. Another one is cloud storage servers, the cloud storage offerings, because very often you'll find that people have gone in all different directions. The company often wants to standardize on one cloud storage service. So do that fearless inventory, understand why people are using the services, and don't take anything away from them without having a viable alternative. So you can reduce the number of services being used, but make sure that you're always meeting the business requirements and the business needs for people as you're making those changes and consolidation.
I agree. Gain visibility first, identify what are the gaps. You will probably discover things you haven't thought about your organization. You do it manually, do it with the cloud provider, deploy a tool that will help you to map your applications and what they're doing in the cloud. Identify the gaps, understand what type of security is already deployed. Some of their application also tell you, no, we configure the security groups, but
Right.
you will take a look and you may discover that it's not in line with your policies or with your organizational standards. Then identify those gaps and deliver a plan of how you close them, and most importantly, how do you automate everything, because the cloud will not stop at the moment you serve it. It will continue, developers will continue deploying new applications, so you need to make sure that everything you do is a continuous process, that you're actually into their tools, into the way they deploy applications. You gain this visibility, you get alerts on your servers that are deployed without the compliance. Otherwise, you will be chasing wind.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and very, very informative.
Thank you. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.